Why is it that programming languages are always in English? If you look at the major programming languages used in the world today, you can see that they are all in English. You need to know English to do any programming. This is a problem because most people don't know English, and they are blocked from all the empowerment and opportunities that come from being able to program. Imagine you're a child in France, and you've been really keen to learn programming. If you're young and haven't had any English courses, then you can't. You will be denied that chance. You will have to wait until you're older and have been through some English classes before you'll be able to learn programming. Or suppose you're an office worker in Japan. If you do a lot of repetitive tasks on your computer and you want to write a small macro program to automate those tasks, you can't if you don't know any English. If you want to make a small update to the HTML of your company's website, you can't if you don't know any English. Simply because you are from a non-English speaking country, you are denied the opportunities that come from knowing how to program. You are less productive, and you have less control over the technology in your world. Some people argue that having to learn English to do any programming isn't a problem. They say that programming is all abstract, so it doesn't matter what language is used for the keywords. These keywords could be replaced with random numbers or gibberish terms, and it wouldn't make a difference. But that's not true. Let's say there's a new programming language with a ton of great features, and it just happens to be in Arabic. Here's some code from it. In theory, it shouldn't matter that the code is in Arabic. You only have to learn a little bit of Arabic to start coding. But if you don't know any Arabic, this can be really intimidating. Think about how many English programmers would be willing to learn this programming language. How many kids in grade school would be willing to learn Arabic so that they can write a Hello World program? The language used for keywords can be a big barrier to using a programming language. The fact that programming is done in English has larger consequences as well. It fundamentally disadvantages non-English countries. Because all programming languages are in English, it's easier for English speakers to learn programming. There's more educational resources available in English, and English-speaking children can start learning programming at younger ages than other children. For example, in the US, there's an entrepreneur, Peter Thiel, who's giving money to students to have them drop out of school and to create software startups. But that isn't possible in a non-English speaking country because students might not actually learn English until they graduate from college. These sorts of advantages mean that English-speaking countries likely have more programmers and cheaper programmers than other countries. Because of this advantage, not only do English-speaking countries dominate the world of software now, but they will likely continue to dominate in the future. Fundamentally, the playing field is not level. The dice are loaded in favor of English-speaking countries. The deck is stacked against all other countries. The USA prides itself for dominating the world of software. They claim their success is due to their culture of innovation and disruption. But is that true? Or is their success due to the fact that the USA is the largest country of native English speakers in the world? Does the US dominate simply because it has an unfair advantage over all other countries in the world? Now, I'm not saying that we should have a revolution to tear down US hegemony in the software industry. I don't know if that's even possible. But are there ways that we can make the system more fair for everyone? Shouldn't all people have an equal chance to get involved in programming and to use programming to improve their lives? You might think that the problem is simply that programmers in non-English countries aren't making their own programming languages, and that the problem will solve itself when those programmers start making more programming languages. But programmers in non-English speaking countries are making their own programming languages. These programming languages are quite popular too. But the programming languages they are making are in English. Despite the fact that the language designers for these languages aren't native English speakers, they still designed languages that work only in English. Why is that? Is there some deeper issue that's causing the world of programming to be English only? I think the problem is that English programming languages are fundamentally more powerful than non-English programming languages. It's not for any technical reasons, though. The reason that English programming languages are more powerful is that they have more users, a richer community, and faster development than others. This is caused by something known as the network effect. The more users that a programming language has, the more useful it is. That causes it to attract more users and become even more useful. For example, think about what happens if you're programming and you encounter a problem. You'll need to look for answers in some documentation or ask others in the community for help. Right now, programmers need to know English to do any programming. That means there are fewer programmers overall, but if you need help, you can ask any other programmer for this help, since all programmers know English. All the documentation and online resources are in English, so it's easy to find what you want. On the other hand, if we had different programming languages for English, French, Japanese, and other languages, then a lot more people overall would be able to program. But the people who program in French wouldn't be able to talk to the people who program in Japanese, and the people who program in Japanese wouldn't be able to talk to the people who program in English. Each programmer community would be isolated. If a French programmer encountered a problem, they would only be able to ask other French programmers for help. There would be less French documentation and online resources available because only French programmers could write such documentation. As a result, French programmers would be less productive than if everyone worked in English. A similar thing happens with programming libraries. Programmers aren't able to program everything themselves, so they rely on libraries of functionality written by other people. Right now, all programming is done in English. That means there are fewer programmers, but all those programmers are making libraries written in English. All these libraries can interact with each other, and very complicated towers of functionality can be built from these libraries. On the other hand, if we had different programming languages for English, French, Japanese, and other languages, then more people would be able to program overall. But each community of programmers would be much smaller, and they wouldn't be able to share libraries with each other. Programmers using a Spanish programming language could write libraries in Spanish for other Spanish programmers to use. But these Spanish programmers wouldn't be able to use any programming libraries written in German or Arabic or Chinese. Although there would be more people programming overall and more programming libraries overall, programming libraries couldn't be shared among these different communities. Within each community, there would be fewer libraries you could combine together and build on top of. As a result, these different programming languages would be less powerful than just having everyone use a single English-only programming language. As you can see, having different programming languages for Chinese, Swahili, Spanish, and other languages just isn't practical. Due to the network effect, these programming languages will always be less powerful than an English programming language. Although English can only be spoken by a small percentage of the world's population, it is still the language known by the most people, making it impossible for programming languages based on other languages to compete. Programmers will always try to use the English version of a programming language because it will be more powerful than the others. Is there a way around this issue though? We know that having separate programming languages for French, German, Korean, and other languages leads to isolated communities that can't share resources. But can we merge these communities together? Can we have one programming language that works with Malaysian, Russian, Arabic, and all the other languages of the world? Instead of communities being isolated, they would be able to share resources with each other, allowing them to compete with an English-only programming language. To explore this idea, I created a variant of JavaScript called Babylscript. This variant is special because it's multilingual. It works in English, French, Chinese, Spanish, German, and 15 other languages. In one program, you can mix code written in all these languages together. At its heart, Babylscript is still JavaScript. By default, you can use it just like normal JavaScript. You can write normal functions, use normal JavaScript symbols, and write normal JavaScript code, and it will run like normal JavaScript. Unlike normal JavaScript, Babylscript lets you switch to different language modes where you can program in French, Korean, or other languages. For example, if you write 3 hyphens, FR for French, and then another 3 hyphens, Babylscript will switch to a French language mode. In the French language mode, you can write your JavaScript code in French. You can even use multiple languages in one program. So, for example, I can switch to the Portuguese language mode by typing 3 hyphens, PT for Portuguese, and then another 3 hyphens. In the Portuguese language mode, I can write a function in Portuguese. Then, I can switch to the French language mode and program in French. Even in the French language mode, though, I can call the function that was defined in the Portuguese language mode. I can create things in one language mode, and it will be available to all the other language modes. It's not just keywords that are different for each language, though. In Babylscript, objects are able to export different APIs or different function names in different languages. For example, in this code, a new window object is created in English. We then set the text of this window to be the string hello in a red color. Then we switch into the French language mode. In this French language mode, the variable win that we defined previously still exists. The object is still the same, but once we're in the French language mode, we can use a French API to access the methods on this object. Instead of setText, we can use the French equivalent écrire text. We can also use a French name to access the color object and use a French name for a color. In the French language mode, you can code entirely in French without having to be aware of support for Japanese, Hindi, or other languages. If you want more details on how Babylscript works, you can refer to the research poster that I made about it. I think it is important to be clear that even though Babylscript can adapt itself so that it can be used in English, Bengali, Dutch, and other languages, Babylscript does not capture all the differences of all the world's languages. The Arabic version of Babylscript is not a true Arabic programming language. The Italian version of Babylscript does not capture all the intricacies of the Italian language. But ultimately, I don't think that matters. Babylscript is supposed to be a multilingual version of JavaScript. It wasn't actually trying to create separate programming languages that work perfectly for English, Arabic, or Italian. This may seem unfair. It gives the impression that Babylscript works better in English than in Spanish or French or other languages. I don't think that's the case, though. In reality, JavaScript isn't really based on English either. JavaScript has its roots in C and C++. These languages are primarily based on math notation. They use functions and arithmetic operations. This mathematical notation isn't English. It's math language. It turns out that math notation is mostly universal and consistent internationally. It doesn't favor English. And to be honest, JavaScript already doesn't make much sense in English. It's just that, as programmers, we use JavaScript so much that it feels natural to us. In JavaScript, we say things like if-then, or if-else, or for loop, but these expressions don't actually make grammatical sense in English. The choices of words in programming languages are there to help users recall what their meaning is, but they don't necessarily have to form grammatically correct sentences in English. And they don't. As you have seen, Babylscript allows you to write programs that mix code written in English, Korean, Dutch, and other languages together. But does this feature help improve the viability of non-English programming languages? If you recall, one advantage of English programming languages is in getting help and documentation from other users. Even though fewer people overall are able to use English programming languages, those programmers are all able to share code and documentation with each other, making English programming languages more powerful than non-English programming languages. With non-English programming languages, although more people overall are able to program, each community is isolated. Chinese programmers cannot share code and documentation with French programmers, who cannot share code and documentation with Spanish programmers. Babylscript does improve this situation somewhat. If you need help while programming, you can look for help on English websites or Portuguese forums or Japanese books. You can take code snippets written in any language and incorporate them into your code without any problems. The different language communities are separate, but these communities do still have some ability to share advice and code samples with each other, meaning that they aren't totally isolated from each other anymore. Programming libraries are another area where English programming languages have an advantage due to the network effect. Although fewer people overall can program, all of those programmers are able to construct libraries that build up on each other to offer powerful functionality. With non-English programming languages, a German programming library could only be shared with other German programmers. A Korean programmer could only build upon Korean programming libraries. Although more people overall would be able to program, each community would be isolated and would not be able to share libraries with each other. Babylscript solves this problem by letting anyone use libraries written in any other language. A German programmer can use a Korean programming library and can even build their own German programming library on top of it. Since each community can use all the programming libraries available in other communities, no community will have access to more powerful programming libraries than other communities. In conclusion, you can now see how the world of programming is very unfair. Almost all programming is currently done in English, and despite the fact that this disadvantages all the people of the world who don't speak English, this situation is unlikely to change because of the network effect. The world inherently favors programming languages designed in English. I think you should come away hopeful, though. I think that if we're clever about how we design our programming languages, if we incorporate the values of diversity and equality into their designs, then we can overcome this problem. We can design programming languages that are more accessible and that encourage more people to learn programming, regardless of whether they speak English or not. And this larger, more diverse community can potentially counteract the tendency for all programming languages to be in English. Babylscript shows an approach for doing this, and hopefully with further research, we'll figure out how to make the world of programming fairer and more accessible.